The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the narrow alley in the quiet neighborhood. It was usually a place children avoided, filled with cracked walls, scattered trash, and the lingering smell of old garbage. But today, the alley had drawn an unusual crowd. A tense murmur rippled through the group gathered there. At the center, a German shepherd lay on the cold, cracked pavement, his body trembling with fear. His fur was matted and dusty, patches missing from neglect or injury. One of his front legs was bent awkwardly beneath him, and a faint, pitiful whimper escaped his lips each time someone kicked near him. "Get away from him!" a woman shouted, stepping forward with anger burning in her eyes. "That dog's dangerous. He attacked my chicken this morning. We can't just let him roam." Several men circled the shepherd, their faces hard with frustration and suspicion. They jabbed their feet towards him, more to intimidate than to truly hurt. But the dog's flinches and low growls showed how scared he was. Fear, pain, and confusion mixed in his amber eyes, reflecting the hopelessness of his situation. At the edge of the crowd, a tiny voice cut through the noise. "Stop, please," said a small girl, barely 5 years old. She was clutching a faded pink doll, its fabric worn and stained. Her dark eyes were wide, shimmering with tears as she looked at the trembling dog. Her name was Amara. Her mother's hand tugged at her jacket, trying to pull her away from the tense scene. "Amara, come here. This isn't safe." But the girl's feet stayed rooted. Her lips trembled and her tiny hands clenched the doll tighter. "But he's hurt, Mama. We have to help him," she whispered, voice barely louder than the wind. The crowd barely noticed the child at first, focused on the argument and the frightened animal at their feet. But then Amara took a step forward. Then another. Then suddenly she was running. Gasps and startled cries burst from the crowd as she darted into the circle, her small frame dropping to her knees beside the German shepherd. Without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around his shaking neck, pressing her face close to his fur. The dog whimpered softly but didn't pull away. The crowd froze. "Hey, get that kid away from the dog," one man barked, his voice harsh, but Amara held on tight, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please, he's scared, he's not bad." Her words were fragile but carried the weight of an innocent heart that understood pain without needing explanations. The tension in the air shifted as murmurs of surprise replaced angry shouts. An old woman in the crowd blinked back tears. "What's gotten into this child? Most adults wouldn't dare get that close." Amara looked up, her face streaked with dirt and tears, her eyes steady and clear. "He needs someone," she said simply. "Someone to love him." Her small voice cracked the armor of suspicion and anger. Slowly people stepped back, some lowering their fists. The man who had been the most aggressive looked down at his boots, ashamed. Others glanced at each other, uneasy. The German shepherd's heavy breathing began to steady as Amara's gentle touch soothed his trembling body. She whispered, softly, "It's okay, boy, I'm here." Her courage, so raw and pure, sparked a quiet change. What had started as a cruel punishment was now a scene of fragile hope. Amara's mother finally reached her side and wrapped a protective arm around her daughter. "Let's find help," she said softly, but Amara didn't want to move. "Not yet," she said. "He's not safe until someone promises to take care of him." In that quiet moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, watching the small child, the broken dog, and the first flicker of kindness in a place shadowed by cruelty. The crowd remained still, the tension melting into a quiet that felt almost fragile. Amara's small hands rested gently on the German shepherd's neck, her touch soft and steady, like a lifeline thrown to a drowning soul. "Stop," she repeated, her voice stronger this time, a mix of innocence and determination. "Please, stop hurting him. He didn't mean to scare anyone." Her words hung in the air, carried by the late afternoon breeze, reaching ears hardened by suspicion. The adults glanced at each other, some shifting uncomfortably, as if her simple plea had cracked a wall they hadn't noticed was there. One man, tall with a graying beard, stepped forward hesitantly. "You think this dog's innocent?" he asked, his voice rough. "He chased after my daughter yesterday, could have been worse." Amara looked up at him, eyes wide but steady. Maybe he was just scared like me when I hear loud noises. The man frowned, unprepared for such honesty. From a child. Around them the crowd started to murmur, some nodding, others shaking their heads, unsure what to believe anymore. "Who's feeding him?" another voice called out. "I've seen him scavenging near the dump for days." No one answered. Amara didn't let go of the dog. Instead, she gently stroked his fur, her fingers tracing the dirt and wounds. "He's hungry," she said quietly, "and hurt. But he's not bad." Her mother tugged again at her sleeve. "Amara, come away now. This is dangerous." But Amara shook her head fiercely. "No, Mama, I have to stay with him. He needs someone." Her mother's eyes filled with tears she refused to shed, torn between fear for her daughter and pride for her courage. From the edge of the crowd, an old woman stepped forward, clutching a cloth bundle. "Here," she said softly, kneeling beside Amara and the dog. "Take this." Amara looked up in surprise, then gently took the cloth, a faded scarf, worn but clean. She wrapped it around the dog's wounded paw, careful not to cause pain. The shepherd leaned into the warmth, eyes fluttering shut for a moment. "Maybe we were wrong about him," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. "Maybe he just needed someone to care." The crowd's mood shifted further. Faces that had been stern now softened. A man who had shouted a moment before lowered his gaze. A mother pulled her children back, whispering reassurances. Amara's voice broke the silence again. "I want to help him. Can we take him somewhere safe? Please." An awkward pause followed. The harsh lines of judgment began to blur, replaced by something new, compassion. Suddenly a calm voice cut through the murmurs. "I'm a teacher nearby," said a man stepping forward. His name was Mr. Yusuf. "I'll call a vet and see what can be done." The crowd parted to let him through, some nodding gratefully, others silently ashamed. Amara's mother wrapped her arms around her daughter, who was still holding the shepherd tightly, refusing to let go. The dog's breathing grew steady, soothed by the child's gentle presence. For the first time that day, he didn't flinch or growl. Instead, he rested his head on Amara's lap, trusting her in a way he hadn't trusted anyone else. As Mr. Yusuf spoke on his phone, promising urgent help, Amara whispered, "You're safe now, Shadow. I'll never let anyone hurt you again." The dog's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the broken world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only two souls, fragile and hopeful, bound by a quiet promise. The crowd began to disperse, conversations turning from anger to concern. Children peeked from doorways, curious about the little girl who dared to stand up for a scared dog. Amara's mother smiled softly at her daughter, a mix of relief and pride shining in her eyes. "You have a brave heart, Amara." The little girl nodded, brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "Because he's like me, just scared and needing a friend." And in that moment, beneath the fading sunlight, something changed, not just for a frightened German shepherd, but for a neighborhood that had forgotten how to care. The sun dipped lower, casting a soft golden glow over the street as the crowd began to thin. But Amara stayed kneeling beside the German shepherd, her arms still wrapped tightly around him like a shield. She refused to let go, not now, not until she knew he would be safe. Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. "Amara, sweetheart, please come inside. You've done so much already." Amara looked up, her eyes tired but unwavering. "I can't leave him here alone," she said quietly. "Not until someone promises he won't get hurt again." Her mother sighed but nodded, understanding that this was more than just a child's whim. It was a plea born from a heart that refused to ignore suffering. The dog's breathing was steadier now, but the pain in his eyes lingered. Every so often he lifted his head, looking at Amara, as if asking for a promise. The little girl squeezed his neck gently. "I promise, Shadow, we'll fix this." As the last of the crowd disappeared, the street grew quieter. The distant hum of cars and faint laughter from nearby homes seemed a world away from the fragile scene in the alley. Then from behind the group a voice called out, "Wait!" It was Mrs. Clark, the elderly woman who had given Amara the scarf earlier. She walked slowly, leaning on her cane, her eyes soft but determined. "I know that dog," she said, nodding toward Shadow. "He's been wandering alone for weeks. No one cared enough to help him. Amara's mother stepped forward. Why didn't anyone do anything sooner? Mrs. Clark shook her head sadly. People are afraid. They think he's dangerous because he's wild. But he's just lost and hurt. Amara's tiny hand still rested on Shadow's neck, her fingers tracing gentle circles. He's not wild, she whispered. He's scared like me. Mrs. Clark smiled faintly. You're right, child, and you have a brave heart to stand up for him. Just then, a soft rumble approached, the sound of a van pulling up slowly nearby. The vet had arrived. Mr. Yusuf greeted the vet as they stepped out, explaining the situation quickly. The vet, a kind woman named Dr. Singh, carried a medical kit and spoke soothing words as she approached. Amara watched, holding her breath, as Dr. Singh knelt beside Shadow. She examined his wounds carefully, gently lifting the injured paw wrapped in the scarf. This poor boy is lucky you found him, the vet said, her voice gentle but firm. He has a fractured leg and several bruises. He needs treatment and a safe place to recover. Amara's eyes lit up. Can I stay with him? Dr. Singh smiled. We'll do our best to make sure he's comfortable. And I think he could use a friend like you. With careful hands, the vet helped lift Shadow onto a stretcher. Amara didn't want to let go, but the dog rested his head against her cheek one last time before being carried away. As the van pulled away, Amara's mother wrapped her arms around her daughter. You were amazing today, she whispered. You helped save him. Amara nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I just hope he knows he's not alone anymore. Mr. Yusuf put a comforting hand on Amara's shoulder. We'll make sure he gets better, and maybe with your help we can change how people see dogs like Shadow. Amara looked up at him, a small smile breaking through her tears. Can I visit him? Of course, he said kindly, and maybe you can tell others his story too. That night, as Amara lay in bed, she thought about the dog she had saved. She whispered to her doll, Shadow's going to be okay. We'll make sure of it. Outside, the stars twinkled quietly, as if watching over a small girl and a wounded dog, two souls beginning a journey of healing, hope, and change. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, the sun casting soft rays through Amara's bedroom window. But while the world outside awoke with the usual bustle, inside Amara's heart was heavy yet hopeful. News of the German Shepherd's rescue had spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some neighbors whispered in amazement about the tiny girl who had stood up to an angry crowd to protect a frightened dog. Others shook their heads, still unsure if kindness was enough to change hardened hearts. Amara's mother sat with her at breakfast, her eyes full of pride and worry. You were so brave, Amara. But it's a big world out there. You'll need help. Amara nodded, her fingers tracing the worn fabric of her doll. I want to help him get better. I want him to have a home. Just then, the doorbell rang. Amara's father opened the door to find Mr. Yusuf standing there, a calm smile on his face. Good morning, Amara, he said softly. I wanted to check on you and tell you I've arranged for Shadow to come to my home while he heals. Amara's eyes lit up. Really? Will he be safe there? Safe and loved, Mr. Yusuf assured her. I have a big backyard where he can run once he's stronger, and I'll make sure he has everything he needs. The thought of Shadow in a warm home made Amara's heart swell. Can I visit him? Every weekend, Mr. Yusuf promised. As the days passed, Amara found herself thinking about Shadow constantly. She asked her mother if she could help take care of animals in need, and her parents agreed to help her volunteer at the local shelter. Meanwhile, Shadow's condition slowly improved. At Mr. Yusuf's home, the shepherd's fractured paw was carefully tended and his wounds cleaned. The once scared and wary dog began to wag his tail at the sound of footsteps and lifted his head when called. Mr. Yusuf often sent Amara pictures and updates, Shadow curled up on a soft blanket. Shadow tentatively playing with a ball, Shadow resting his head by the window as sunlight warmed his fur. But it wasn't just Shadow who was healing. The neighborhood was beginning to change too. People who had once turned away from strays started leaving food out. Children talked about the brave little girl who protected the dog. The angry crowd had been replaced by whispers of hope and kindness. One afternoon, Mr. Yusuf invited Amara and her family to visit Shadow. When she saw him, the dog's tail thumped the floor with excitement. He limped toward her slowly, but his eyes shone with trust. Amara knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You're going to be okay now, Shadow. We're going." "To make sure of it," Mr. Yusuf smiled at the sight. "You did more than help one dog, Amara. You helped this whole community remember what compassion looks like." Amara's mother squeezed her hand. "You have a gift, sweetheart. A gift to see the good when others don't." That night, as Amara lay in bed, she dreamed of a world where every animal was safe, where no one ever felt scared or alone. And, somewhere in the quiet night, Shadow slept peacefully in his new home, his broken body healing but his spirit forever changed by a little girl's courage. Weeks turned into months, and with every passing day Shadow grew stronger. The dog that once trembled beneath a crowd's cruelty was now a lively figure bounding through Mr. Yusuf's backyard. His coat gleamed and his eyes sparkled with a new kind of light, the light of trust and love. Amara visited him every weekend without fail. Each time she brought a small gift, a new chew toy, a ball, or sometimes a simple blanket she had sewn herself. Shadow greeted her with joyful barks and gentle licks, his tail wagging wildly. But the real change wasn't just in Shadow. It was in the neighborhood. Inspired by Amara's courage and the kindness of Mr. Yusuf and others, a group of neighbors came together to form a community animal care group. They organized food drives for stray animals, cleaned the local parks, and shared stories to educate others about kindness and empathy. Amara became a quiet leader among them, her story spreading beyond the small street to nearby schools and community centers. Teachers invited her to speak about compassion, and children listened wide-eyed as she told them about Shadow, the scared dog who found hope because one child refused to look away. One afternoon, as Amara and her mother walked past the alley where it all began, they noticed something different. The walls, once covered with peeling paint and graffiti, now had bright murals, painted by local artists and children, depicting animals, kindness, and hope. At the center, a large portrait of Shadow and Amara smiled down, capturing the spirit of a community transformed. Amara's mother squeezed her hand. "You helped change all of this, Amara. You showed everyone how to care." Amara smiled shyly, but knew it was the truth. Her small act of bravery had sparked something bigger than she had ever imagined. But it wasn't always easy. Some people remained doubtful or indifferent. "It's just a dog," they would say. Why bother? Amara's answer was simple. Because every life matters. Because kindness can change the world. Her words echoed in the hearts of those willing to listen. One day, while visiting Shadow, Amara noticed a new visitor, a man in a worn jacket carrying a camera. He introduced himself as a local journalist, interested in telling Shadow's story. Amara hesitated, unsure at first, but then she realized this was a chance to spread the message even further. As the interview unfolded, Amara spoke with honesty and passion, sharing how a scared dog and a tiny girl had touched a whole town. She spoke about fear, courage, and the power of one small voice. The article was published the next week, and suddenly Shadow's story was everywhere. Letters poured in from people who wanted to help, adopt, or start similar kindness projects in their own communities. Amara felt a warmth inside, a quiet pride not for herself, but for what could happen when people choose love over fear. That night as she lay in bed, she whispered to her doll, "We did it, Shadow. We made a difference." And somewhere far away, in a cozy home filled with sunlight, a German shepherd dreamed peacefully, safe, loved, and forever changed by a tiny child's brave heart. As spring blossomed across the town, a gentle wave of change continued to spread, one sparked by a little girl and a wounded German shepherd. Amara's story, now told in schools, newspapers, and local events, had inspired others in ways no one expected. Stray animals once ignored were now being fed and cared for. Parks that had been littered with trash and broken glass were transformed into safe playgrounds, not only for children, but also for the animals they shared the neighborhood with. One afternoon, as Amara walked home from school, she noticed a new sign posted near the park entrance. It read, "Kindness Park, a place for all creatures, great and small." The sign was painted in bright colors, adorned with paw prints and smiling faces. Her mother smiled as she saw Amara's eyes light up. "You helped make that happen," she said softly. Amara nodded, but felt a deep truth in her heart. It wasn't just her doing. It was the kindness of the whole community coming together. At home, Amara found herself thinking about how many other animals might still be scared or alone. "Maybe we can help more," she said to her mother one evening. Her parents agreed and suggested starting a small volunteer group for children, teaching them how to care for animals and stand up for what's right. Amara was thrilled. She gathered a handful of friends from school, some shy, some eager, and began holding weekly meetings at her house. They learned about animal care, how to approach stray dogs safely, and how even small acts of kindness could change lives. One of her friends, Luis, had never been interested in animals before, but was drawn in by Amara's passion. "I want to help too," he said, petting Amara's dog gently. Together they planned projects like making bird feeders, collecting blankets for shelter animals, and creating posters to raise awareness. Their enthusiasm caught the attention of the town council, who offered to provide space for the group in the community center. Soon children and parents alike joined, and the volunteer group grew into a vibrant hub of activity and learning. Meanwhile, Shadow's story remained a beacon. Mr. Yusuf invited Amara and her friends to visit Shadow regularly, teaching them how to care for him and other animals recovering from injuries. One day during a visit, Amara noticed a little boy sitting alone near the fence, watching Shadow with curious eyes but too shy to approach. She walked over gently and sat beside him. "Do you want to say hi?" she asked. He nodded hesitantly. "I'm scared of dogs," he admitted softly. Amara smiled kindly. Shadow was scared too, but he's learning to trust. Maybe you can help him, and he can help you. The boy's face brightened just a little, and soon, with Amara's encouragement, he reached out to pet Shadow's soft fur. It was a small moment, but it carried a powerful message. Kindness could heal not just animals, but people too. News of the volunteer group's work reached beyond the town. Other communities began starting their own projects, inspired by a story that began with a tiny girl and a scared dog. One evening, as Amara prepared for bed, she looked out her window at the peaceful street below. She whispered, "We're just getting started, Shadow. There's so much more to do." And in a quiet home nearby, a German shepherd stretched out comfortably, his heart full, his spirit unbroken, living proof that even the smallest acts of courage could create ripples of hope across a whole town. Even as Shadow's fur grew shinier and his steps steadier, there were moments when the past haunted him. Sometimes when the wind howled through the trees or a sudden noise echoed in the night, his body tensed and his eyes searched the shadows for threats. Amara noticed these moments and understood that healing wasn't just about mending bones, it was about healing fears too. One quiet afternoon, as the sun warmed the garden where Shadow lay resting, Amara sat beside him with a book in her lap. She read stories aloud, hoping the calm sound of her voice would comfort him. Shadow's head rested on her knee, eyes half closed but alert. Slowly he began to relax, letting go of the tension that had gripped him. Amara stroked his fur gently. "It's okay, Shadow, you're safe now, no one will hurt you." Sometimes Amara wondered how many other animals suffered in silence, their pain unseen by the world. It made her even more determined to spread kindness and understanding. At school, she shared her experiences with her classmates, encouraging them to be brave like her, to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. One day, a new student named Maya joined the class. She was quiet and kept to herself, often flinching at loud noises or sudden movements. Amara saw something familiar in Maya's eyes, a shadow of fear mixed with hope. She approached her after class and smiled warmly. "Hi, I'm Amara. If you ever want to talk or hang out, I'm here." Maya hesitated but nodded, and over the following weeks the two became friends. Maya shared that she had moved from another town where she faced bullying and loneliness. Amara invited Maya to visit Shadow, hoping the dog's gentle presence might help her find peace. When Maya met Shadow, she was cautious at first. But as she sat quietly beside him, stroking his fur, she smiled for the first time in a long while. "Thank you, Amara," Maya whispered. "You and Shadow have helped me feel less alone." Amara's heart swelled with joy. She realized that kindness was a language that healed all wounds, whether in animals or people. Back in the neighborhood, the community continued to grow stronger. The animal care group expanded its reach, organizing workshops on empathy, respect, and responsibility. One memorable event was the annual Day of Compassion, where families, children, and pets gathered in the park to celebrate kindness with games, stories, and shared meals. Shadow, now a local hero, was the guest of honor. Children laughed as they played around him, and adults spoke about how a single act of courage had transformed their town. But not everyone was convinced. Some still whispered doubts, questioning whether a dog and a child could really change anything meaningful. Amara understood that change was a slow journey, filled with setbacks and challenges. But she believed that every small step forward was worth the effort. One evening, as she sat with her parents, Amara shared her dreams. "I want to help more animals. I want to teach people to be kinder." Her mother smiled, brushing a stray hair from Amara's face. "You already are, sweetheart. You've touched so many lives." Amara looked out the window where the stars twinkled like tiny promises. She whispered softly, "This is just the beginning." And nearby, in a warm home filled with love, Shadow lay peacefully, his eyes shining with the quiet strength of survival and the bright hope of a future built on courage and compassion. The seasons changed again, and with them, the story of Shadow and Amara became a lasting part of the town's heart. Shadow, once a frightened dog kicked and ignored by a crowd, was now a symbol of hope and transformation. His wounds had healed, but more importantly, his spirit had been renewed by a small child's unwavering courage. Amara, too, had grown, not just in years, but in kindness, wisdom, and strength. The lessons she had learned from Shadow shaped her, every step, guiding her toward a future filled with promise. One crisp autumn day, the town gathered in the park for the unveiling of a new statue, a life-sized sculpture of Shadow and Amara, standing side by side. The statue captured the moment that had changed everything, a tiny girl holding a scared dog, refusing to look away. As the cloth was pulled back, a hush fell over the crowd. Tears glistened in many eyes. The mayor stepped forward to speak. "This statue is not just of a dog and a child. It is a tribute to kindness, bravery, and the power of compassion to change lives. Let it remind us all that even the smallest voices can echo through our community and inspire hope." Amara stood beside the statue, her hand resting on Shadow's now strong neck. The real Shadow sat calmly by her side, tail wagging gently. After the ceremony, children ran through the park playing with dogs and sharing stories of bravery. Adults spoke quietly, reflecting on how much had changed and how much more there was still to do. Amara's volunteer group had grown into a foundation, supporting animal shelters, educating families, and spreading the message of empathy far beyond the town's borders. That night, as Amara lay in bed, she thought about the journey from the day she had found Shadow trembling on the street to now, a journey marked by tears, laughter, pain, and hope. She whispered softly, "Thank you, Shadow, for teaching me how to be brave, for showing me how kindness can change the world." And somewhere nearby, in the peaceful quiet of a loving home, Shadow rested, no longer afraid, but proud. Proud to be the dog who inspired a town. Proud to be the friend of a little girl whose heart was as big as the sky. Their story was a reminder that courage is not about size or strength. It's about the willingness to stand up for what is right, even when it's hard. And that love, when given freely and fiercely, can heal wounds that seem impossible to mend. As dawn broke the next morning, Amara looked out her window with hope shining in her eyes. The future was wide open, full of possibility, and she knew She would keep walking the path of kindness step by step, paw by paw, because sometimes all it takes is one small act to change the world forever.